Chapter 21 The Sea Witch. The others were thrilled by the twins' triumphant return from the castle ruins. "Well done," Froggy said, and patted them on the back with a relieved smile. "We knew you could do it," Goldilocks said, and winked at them. Red took the wand from Connor. She was mesmerized by it. "It's so shiny," she said, although the twins weren't positive she was impressed by the accomplishment so much as by the fact that they had returned with something else she could view herself in. "Was everything all right in there?" Jack asked them. The twins looked to each other and both fell silent. "Not exactly," Connor said. "We saw the evil queen." "She's been trapped in the magic mirror ever since you used the wishing spell," Alex said. Everyone was just as shocked as the twins had been to discover this. "How horrible," Goldilocks said quietly to herself. "There's no hope of getting her out now, I suppose," Jack said. Connor shook his head. "She doesn't want to be rescued. She thinks she deserves to be in there. There's not much left of her to save anyways." "Well, speaking as one of the victims she kidnapped and almost fed to the wolves, I'm not sure I feel sorry for her," Red confessed. "There's more bad news," Alex said. "We asked her about the Enchantress. She probably knew her better than anyone." "What did she say?" Froggy asked, and they all leaned closer to hear the answer. "She said Esme's most prized possession is herself," Alex said. Jack, Goldilocks, and Froggy looked to one another with the same exasperated expression. "Doesn't make any sense," Froggy said. "How can living things make up the wand? I understand how the harp could be considered a prized item, but not the Enchantress herself." Red scrunched her lips and hummed, thinking on the subject. "I think the evil queen is mistaken. I'm not a stranger to loving myself, but that self-admiration comes from something. For example, if you took away my beauty or my incredible ability to match dresses with tiaras, I wouldn't value myself half as much as I do now." The others weren't sure how to gauge the outburst. Red was always very coherent or not at all. There was really an in-between. "What are you saying, Red?" Goldilocks asked. "I'm saying it's not the actual woman we should be concerned about getting," Red explained. "We need to find what the Enchantress values the most about herself and take it away from her." Everyone thought about it, and their heads slowly moved in a mutual nod. This was the first moment any of them were happy Red had demanded to come along on the trip. "That's so insightful, Red," Connor said. "Shallow, but insightful." "How do we retrieve it for the wand?" Jack asked. No one could come up with an immediate answer. What was the one quality Esme prized above the rest? There were so many things she obviously cherished. Her beauty, her power, her ruthlessness. Or perhaps it was a combination of all the three. And whatever it was, how would they take it away from her? "Well, we know it would be a challenge," Goldilocks said and let out a long sigh. The six headed over to the moat and back to the granny. They returned to a furious harp, whose strings played an angry chord as she pouted. "Harper, what's the matter?" Jack asked her. "That thing peed on me!" the harp exclaimed, and pointed to Claudius, who was crouching shamefully in the corner of the lower deck. "That's my fault. I forgot to take him out before we left," Red said. "My apologies, Mother in training." She scooped him up and carried him off the ship. The crew waited until nightfall before firing up the ship and steering it south. "Next stop, Mermaid Bay," Jack called out. "Does the sea witch live in the bay?" Connor asked. "From what I read, she lives in the ocean waters just outside it," Froggy said. "How do we find her?" Goldilocks asked. "I'm a good swimmer, believe it or not," Froggy said. "I can look around the ocean floor and report back to you. We'll have to be very careful once we get there. The sea witch is known for being very sneaky with her trades." "We'll have to outsmart her then," Alex said. "If her jewels are her most valued possession, we'll have to trade her something in exchange for them." "What's the most valuable item we have in our possession?" Connor asked. "What do we have to trade with her?" "The harp?" Red asked a little hopefully. "No, we need to keep her until we can figure out how to incorporate her into the wand," Jack said. Goldilocks' face suddenly lit up as if an actual light bulb had appeared over her head. "I think we're all forgetting something in our possession that's even more valuable," she said. "What's that?" Alex said. They all stared at her, completely puzzled. "Red," Goldilocks said. "We have an actual queen on our ship." Everyone immediately turned to look at Red. As expected, the young queen was appalled by the idea. "You want to trade me to the sea witch like some farm animal?" Red said. "Absolutely not! Out of question." "It's a good option," Jack said, defending Goldilocks' idea. Red grunted and her nostrils flared. "Now you listen to me, giant chaser," she said and pointed her finger at all of them. "So far I've built us a ship, lost half of my wardrobe, and adopted a killer animal, snuck into the wicked stepmother's estate, and supplied something nice to look at during this escapade. If you ask me, I've gone above and beyond what a normal queen would do. Do you see Cinderella flying a mile above the ground? No. Is Snow White risking her life for the greater good? No. Is Rapunzel braiding her hair to restore peace and harmony? No." Everyone slumped. They couldn't argue, but they also didn't have much to work with. "I'll do it then," Goldilocks said. "What?" Jack gasped. "I'll pretend to be Red," Goldilocks said plainly. "You can trade me for the jewels, and the Sea Witch will never be the wiser." "We most certainly will not," Jack protested, outraged by just the suggestion of it. "It's the best way," Goldilocks said. "After you collect the jewels, you'll only have one more thing to complete the wand. Once you defeat the Enchantress, you come back for me. Until then, I'll keep my cover and make the Sea Witch happy." Jack was shaking his head. He couldn't imagine leaving the woman he loved the most in the world in the hands of someone so horrible. "Oh, Jack," Goldilocks said, flattered by how worked up he had become, "you know I'll be able to handle a little old sea witch. I've been stuck in worse situations before." Jack held her close, looking deeply into her eyes. "What if, for whatever reason, we can't come back for you?" he said. Goldilocks looked down at the floor, knowing what he meant. "If I get anxious, I'll find a way out," she said, and returned his loving gaze. "You have to trust me." It was an incredible sacrifice to make, but no one could persuade her otherwise. "Red, I never thought I would ever say this, but I'm going to need to borrow a dress," Goldilocks said. "I doubt anything of mine will fit you," Red said. Froggy cleared his throat. "Darling, don't be rude," he said. "That is true. I'm sure I can make something work," Red said, and gave in. She grabbed Goldilocks' hand and dragged her down to the lower deck to play dress-up. Jack went to the steering wheel and looked ahead of them to the horizon, but his thoughts were anywhere but with the ship. Froggy played tug-of-war with Claudius, while Alex and Connor sat on the deck floor near the bow of the Granny. Alex rested her head on her hand and stared off into space, having her own reservations about their plan. "What's on your mind?" Connor asked Alex. "You look troubled." Alex sighed. "It's just a little concerning to think about leaving Goldilocks with the Sea Witch," she said. "I know, but what else can we do? It's a great idea," Connor said. "I guess," Alex said. Something had been on her mind, and she felt it was time to tell her brother before her head exploded. "Connor, when we were back in the northern mountains, the Snow Queen said something to me. I didn't think much of it, but then it's really starting to worry me now." "What did she tell you?" Connor asked. "She said, 'Of the 4 travelers, one will not return,'" Alex said. "I thought it was just nonsense. I mean, an avalanche had just fallen on the woman. But now I wonder if she was making a prophecy. I wonder if she was talking about Goldilocks." "But there's 6 of us traveling," Connor said. 7 including the mutt and 8 counting the harp." "I know, it doesn't make sense," Alex said and rubbed her tired eyes. "But I'm still worried there may have been some truth to it. We've been really lucky so far, but what if one of us doesn't survive this trip?" Connor surprised her with his reaction. He didn't reciprocate her fear, but met it with a calmness that reminded her of their dad. "Alex, we all know what we're getting into," he said. "Just because you and I are spearheading this mission doesn't mean it's our fault if anything goes wrong. We're all trying to save the world, and as awful as it sounds, if one of us doesn't make it to the process, I can't think of a better way to die than being a hero." She let out a long, exasperated breath escape her lungs. "There are worse fates, I suppose," Alex said. "I'd hate to lose someone for no reason, though. I don't know if I could live with myself." "We'll just have to make sure we succeed then," Connor said. Within the hour, Red climbed up from the lower deck with a proud smile on her face. "Ahem," she said, getting all of their attention. "Lady, wuv, and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my latest creation. She may be a rough porridge-eating fugitive by the day, but tonight I would like to introduce you to the new and improved Goldilocks." Goldilocks walked up the steps behind her. She was wearing one of Red's corsets with the long red gown, a hooded cape, and matching gloves. Red had even put her hair up in a stylish do similar to her own and had painted some rouge on her cheeks. There was no doubt about it. Goldilocks looked stunning. "Goldie," Jack said, you look gorgeous." He looked like a teenager in love. Thank you, Goldilocks said and blushed. She didn't get too many opportunities to look pretty for him. You're welcome, Red said and swayed happily. The corset is a little small for her. Poor thing, her waist isn't quite as slender as mine. That's because I'm hiding 3 daggers under here, Goldilocks said. She had trouble balancing in a pair of Red's high heels. I don't know how you walk in these shoes. They're completely impractical. I don't know how you walk in them either. They're meant for feet almost half the size of yours. I'm only teasing, Goldie. Put that knife away, Red said and ran to the other side of the ship. The harp grew bored below them and began to play a soft melody for herself that could be heard on the upper deck. Jack grabbed Goldilocks' waist. Care to dance? He asked. Oh, Jack, Goldilocks laughed. Come on, when's the last time we got a dance? Jack asked her. The last time, I believed, involved a witch throwing the stones at our feet, she said. Jack chuckled at the memory and spun her around. They danced to the harp's tune under the starry night sky, gazing into each other's eyes. Would you do me the honor? Froggy asked Red and offered her his hand with an overly pronounced bow. I'd be delighted, Red said. They didn't dance quite as smoothly as Jack and Goldilocks. Red kept stepping on Froggy's large webbed feet, but both couples enjoyed the time for all it was worth. The twins smiled as they looked on, knowing this would be something they'd remember forever. It was a few minutes before dawn, and the granny was still a ways away from Mermaid Bay. We're not going to make it to the bay before sunrise, Jack said from behind the steering wheel. We need to put the ship down before we're caught. We can travel the rest of the way by water, Goldilocks said. We'll land it in the Sleepy River and then sail down the river into the bay. That's brilliant, Froggy said. Very well, Jack said. Everyone prepare the ship for a water landing. Goldilocks took over the steering wheel. Froggy grabbed hold of the sail's ropes and flattened them to the sides of the balloon. Jack pulled the lever under the ship's flame, and it diminished. The granny began to descend. Goldilocks aligned the ship with the wide river flowing on the ground below. The twins weren't sure what to expect. Would a water landing be rougher or easier? In a few moments they had their answer. The ship dove into the water, coming to a painful, abrupt stop, and nearly submerging itself completely on impact. The entire deck and its crew were drenched. Connor spat out a mouthful of water. Thank goodness that was easy, he said sarcastically. I'm on the side and can't get up, the harp called up from the lower deck. The wolf is licking my face. Can someone please help me before he gets any other ideas? Froggy hopped down the steps to assist her. Red wrung her wet dress over the side of the ship. She was not enjoying life at the moment. The ship sailed peacefully down the river as the sun rose farther into the sky. Not long after, Mermaid Bay came into view ahead. The ship was just about to spill into the bay from the river when it came to another abrupt stop, knocking everyone to the deck floor. Jack jumped to his feet and ran to the front of the ship to look overboard. The ship is stuck in the delta, he said. The twins joined him and took a look for themselves. The granny was only a few feet away from fully being in the bay, but was stuck in a very narrow channel. Oh, great, Connor grunted. Now what? Just as the others were about to panic, something very colorful caught Alex's eye. Look, she said, and excitedly pointed down at the water. The thing swam under the ship and disappeared from sight. Where did it go? Jack asked. Alex, Connor, Jack! Froggy yelled from the back of the ship. Take a look at this! They joined him at the back of the ship and gazed into the river below. It was difficult to make out what was happening through the ripples of water, but Alex and Connor recognized it right away. Dozens of mermaids had gathered behind the granny and were slowly pushing the ship through the delta. They had pale skin and long, colorful tails that matched their long, beautiful hair, just as the twins had remembered. The ship began to move through the channel little by little, thanks to the mermaids' efforts. Well, I'll be darned, Froggy said, amazed at what he was witnessing. The granny edged forward, bit by bit, finally squeezing through the channel and splashing into the bay. That was so kind of them, Alex said. Why were they helping us? Connor asked. Goldilocks whistled from behind the steering wheel. Speaking of mysteries, what is that? She nodded to something ahead of them. In the distance, hovering majestically in the misty bay air, was a large cluster of sea foam. It was shaped in the silhouette of a mermaid and shimmered in the sunlight, continuously rejuvenating itself. Alex grabbed Connor's arm. It's the sea foam spirit, she said. Come again? Froggy asked. It's the little mermaid, Connor explained to the others. Or at least it used to be. I wonder what she's doing here. You think she knows we're going to visit the sea witch? Alex asked. The granny sailed closer to the foam until it hovered directly in front of the ship. Hello, Alex. Hello, Connor, the sea foam spirit said. The others were shocked to hear her speak. Red rubbed her eyes. She didn't believe what she was seeing. Is this clump of bubbles a friend of yours? She asked the twins as if she was making a judgment against their character. What are you doing here? Alex asked the sea foam spirit. I've come to speak with you, the sea foam spirit said. You're trying to stop us from going to visit the sea witch, aren't you? Connor said. On the contrary, I have come to assist you, the spirit said. I may be the world's greatest cautionary tale when it comes to matters of the sea witch, but I've come to offer you help. I've heard about your quest. We all have. The spirit gestured to the water below where all the mermaids had gathered. The bay looked like a colorful koi pond. Who told you about our quest? Alex asked. No one told me. I heard your thoughts, the sea foam spirit said. I thought you could only hear and feel thoughts expressed in or near the water, Connor said, remembering what he had learned during their last encounter. As the snow melts down the mountains and pours into rivers that lead to the sea, it brings with it the thoughts of those who have traveled across it. Connor hooted. So much for privacy, he said. How can you help us? Alex asked the spirit. Can you take us to the sea witch? I cannot leave the bay, the sea foam spirit said, but I asked an old friend to escort you to the depths of the sea where the sea witch dwells. That would be terrific, thanks, Connor said. Who is your friend? Are they solid at least? Very, the sea foam spirit said. Suddenly, a gigantic splash erupted from the bay, and a sea turtle of epic proportions emerged from the water. He was as big as their ship. The entire crew was flabbergasted, and their eyes grew to the size of tennis balls. Connor leaned closely to Froggy. I never thought I'd see a reptile as big as you, he whispered. The great sea turtle is very old, the sea foam spirit said. He can't hear very well, but he will escort you to the sea witch. How far away is the sea witch's lair? Jack asked. It's a day's journey to the bottom of the ocean, the sea foam spirit said, but the great sea turtle can get you there in a quarter of the time. How are we supposed to breathe? Goldilocks asked. The sea foam spirit extended both of her hands, and 6 white scallop shells appeared. They each had a seaweed band around them, like they were oceanic surgical masks. The sea foam spirit passed them to the men and women aboard the ship. These will supply you with air while you're under the water, she said. Did they come in pink? Red asked. Froggy passed on his shell. I'm fine, he said. Being a frog has its perks, you know. He took a deep breath, and his throat expanded into a large bubble. Awesome! Connor chuckled and poked it. The sea foam spirit nodded to the great sea turtle. It's time, she instructed. The turtle drifted towards the ship and placed his front flipper gently on the bow like a drawbridge. Jack and Froggy armed themselves with daggers and rope, then led the others over the turtle's flipper and onto his shell. They gathered at the front of his shell and each held tightly to the edge. Good luck. May all of the spirits of the sea be with you, the sea foam spirit said, and then she disappeared. The turtle drifted away from the granny and gradually sank into the water. The water was colder than they expected, and they all gave small yelps. It was very strange to breathe from the shells. They inhaled normally, but a trail of tiny bubbles fluttered above them every time they exhaled. It was like they were magically scuba diving, and just like with regular scuba diving, there was plenty to see. The entire bay floor was covered in bright coral and plants. Mermaids and fish of all colors and sizes swam through it like it was a vast underwater city, their bodies shimmering in the ripple sunlight from above. It was a beautiful sight, and the twins made sure to seize every moment of it. Soon they left the bay, and the great sea turtle traveled deeper into the endless ocean ahead. The ocean floors wasn't nearly as colorful as the bottom of the bay. It was very bare, with nothing but rocks and seaweed spread across it. An enormous underwater canyon was ahead of them, and the turtle dived down into it. It had jagged edges and sharp rocks along its side, and the canyon floor was littered with ghostly empty shells. It was like an underwater graveyard. They knew they were close. The turtle swam through the canyon, and the twins saw a wide entrance to an underwater cave ahead. The cave was surrounded with small glowing lights, inviting and decorative. However, as they got closer, the twins realized the lights were the glowing antennas of a school of anglerfish surrounding the entrance to the cave. They were terrifying, with sharp, toothy overbites and the spikes down their spines. They were the monsters of the sea. The anglerfish glared at them as the sea turtle passed into the cave. To their discomfort, the inside of the cave was filled with even more of the scary-looking fish. They peered out from behind stalagmites and stalactites. Their antennae gave off the only light in the cave. Imprisoned behind nets and rock cages throughout the cave were other sea creatures. Swordfish, seahorses, octopi, manatees, and whales all looked somberly as the passing turtle, hoping it wouldn't suffer the same fate. The anglerfish watched over the creatures like prison guards. The turtle arrived at the entrance to a long tunnel, as if the twins hadn't seen enough to give them nightmares for years after. The tunnel was being watched over by a group of great white sharks. They lingered eerily in the water, staring sinisterly at the turtle and his passengers. The sea turtle moaned at the sharks. Nothing happened. The turtle moaned again, and the sharks slowly separated and let him pass into the tunnel. They turned chillingly as he passed. All they needed was one threatening gesture, and the sharks would have food for a week. They traveled through the tunnel for a few moments and then surfaced in a cave within the cave. To their astonishment, the cave was filled with air. "We can breathe down here," Alex said, and they all took off their shell masks. "The sea witch has to appeal to her human customers, too," Froggy said, and his throat deflated to normal. They climbed off the turtle and walked across the floor in single file. They all shivered terribly. Their bodies were so confused as to what temperature to be. "Good turtle, stay," Connor said to the great sea turtle. The turtle squinted at him and then spat a stream of water in his face. "Sorry, didn't mean to patronize." "Oh, my Lord!" Red gasped and tears filled her eyes. "Look up there!" She pointed above them to one of the most gruesome sights the twins had ever seen. Dozens of mermaids were hung upside down from their tails across the dome-shaped cave ceiling. They were all weak and frail. Some breathed heavily while others didn't breathe at all. Some were just skeletons while others were close to becoming one. "What are they doing up there?" Alex said, covering her mouth in horror. She wanted to save them all but knew it wouldn't be possible, at least not today. "Those are probably the sea witch's customers who couldn't fulfill their bargains," Froggy said. Jack was wide-eyed and white-faced, terrified they would be leaving Goldilocks to suffer in the same conditions. She implored him to stick to their plan in spite of what they saw, even though they could all tell she was hesitant herself. The group traveled farther into the cave. A whale's rib cage was positioned like a grand staircase leading up to another smaller cave. Jellyfish carcasses covered the entrance like a curtain. A large rocky platform at the base of the ribs acted like a small stage. The sea witch must have enjoyed looking down on her customers. "Are you ready for this?" Connor asked Goldilocks. She nodded, mustering up as much bravery as she could. Jack kissed her as though it would be the last time. The passionate display normally would have made the twins look away, but they all shared Jack's reluctance as he said goodbye to the woman he loved. "I love you," he whispered into her ear. "Likewise," Goldilocks said and winked at him. The team huddled together, reiterating their course of action. "All right, we are ruthless pirates who have kidnapped Queen Red," Froggy said and gestured to the twins. "I have been cursed to live out my days as a frog, and you have been cursed to remain adolescents." The twins nodded. "Aye, aye, Captain," Connor said and saluted. "How fun! It's like a little play," Red said and excitedly clapped her hands. "Who will I be?" "You'll be hiding behind with me," Jack said. "We'll be back up in case they run into any problems." "Let's hide back here," Jack said, and pulled the young queen behind a large rock. "It's always best to have backup." "Let's make this a little more believable," Froggy said, taking the rope off his shoulder and tying it loosely around Goldilocks. She legitimately looked like a prisoner now. "Shall we?" The four of them traveled up to the rocky platform while Jack and Red hid behind a large rock. "Hello!" Froggy called up to the whale ribs. "Sea witch, we've come to make a trade." Their anticipation made time go by incredibly slowly as they waited for the sea witch to appear. Just when they began wondering if she would ever show her face, they heard horrible scraping noises from beyond the jellyfish curtain. A series of heavy footsteps, several footsteps, sounded through the cave like a giant spider was approaching. The sea witch appeared through the jellyfish curtain. Her skin was pale turquoise and scaled. Tall blades of seaweed grew straight out of her head like hair. She had a wide face with wide turquoise lips and a round insect-like black eyes. She wore a gown made of dark shell that had several muscles and a sea poulps growing on it. She walked on 6 legs, and a pair of claws peeked out from under her gown, as though she were part crustacean. She cuddled a plump cuttlefish in her arms, stroking it like it was a small, slimy pet. "Customers!" the sea witch hissed in a snake-like voice. "Welcome, fellow vertebrates, to my underwater underworld." The twins were shivering from being so cold. The sea witch didn't notice they were trembling from fear as well. "Get me out of here!" Goldilocks yelled, playing the part of a captive red. "It smells so nasty in here. I want to go home. I want to be back in my castle." "And who do we have here?" inquired the sea witch, interested by the choice of words. "We have brought you Queen—" Froggy started, but Goldilocks interrupted him. "I'll introduce myself, thank you," she said, playing the part impressively well. "I am Queen Red Riding Hood of the Red Riding Hood Kingdom, and if you don't release me at once, I will have my soldiers swim down here and make ink of you all." The sea witch's eyes widened. Not only was she buying it, she was intrigued. "A captured queen, you say?" she asked. "And you wish to trade her for what?" "We've come for your jewels," Froggy said. The sea witch let out a long, hissing laugh that sounded like it might have come from a dying cat. "You insult me with your offer," she said. "I'll make a deal with you. I will give you one of my pearls in exchange for the queen." She gently placed her hand over the pearl necklace wrapped around her neck. Each pearl was black, and they were all different sizes and shapes. "Which, please," Connor said. "We've got a living, breathing queen. We're the ones who should be requesting more from you." The sea witch eyed him. She didn't like being beaten at her own game. "You are just a large frog and 2 children. Tell me how you acquired a queen," she hissed. Connor laughed a little too hard. "We only appear as a frog and children because that's how we've been cursed to spend eternity." He pointed to his sister. "This girl used to be a 6-foot man with the hairiest chest in all of the kingdoms." Alex closed her eyes and assembled enough pretenses to go along with her brother's ridiculous backstory. "Grr, I miss me man body," she said in her best impression of a pirate's voice. The sea witch looked down at them. Peculiarly, she had been hanging on every word they had said until this point. "I was on my royal boat when they scooped me up and brought me here," Goldilocks cried, trying to authenticate their tale. "Do we have a trade, sea witch?" Froggy called up to her. "Or shall we take the queen back to the land and sell her to the ogres?" The sea witch thought on it, stroking the cuttlefish as she did. "Very well," she said. "I believe we have a deal." The sea witch climbed down the whale ribs towards them. She got a better glimpse of her black pearl necklace, and their hearts fluttered with the knowledge that it was exactly what they needed. But the twins' eyes fell to a familiar ring she wore on her turquoise finger. It was silver and had 2 diamonds, one blue and the other pink. Alex and Connor looked back and forth between the ring and each other. Was it just a coincidence, or had their worlds collided more than they realized? "That ring!" Alex gasped. "Where did you get it?" The sea witch glanced at her ring and then suspiciously down to Alex. "The same place I get all my jewelry," she hissed. "From people like you and creatures like them." She jerked her head toward the ceiling where all the mermaids hung. "Do you want to make a trade or not?" "Yes," Froggy said, getting the twins back on the subject. A conniving smile stretched across the sea witch's face. "Hand over the queen first, and I'll give you the jewels," she said. "Nice try," Connor said. "Give us the jewels and we'll hand you the queen." The tensions between them grew. "As you wish," the sea witch said through a frown. She raised her arm, and 2 crabs crawled out from under her dress. They crawled around her body, collecting all the jewelry she wore. The crabs climbed down the platform and stood in front of the twins. Froggy untied Goldilocks and pushed her up the platform towards the sea witch. A long black and white striped sea snake slithered out of the sea witch's gown and towards her. "On the count of 3 we'll make the exchange," the sea witch said. 1, 2, 3. The twins took the jewels from the crabs, and the snake wrapped around Goldilocks like a living rope. Alex and Connor pocketed the pearls and the other jewels. They were happy the trade had been made, but they desperately didn't want to leave Goldilocks behind. "This has been splendid," Froggy said with a nod and slowly backed away from the platform. "Pleasure doing business with you." "Not so fast," the sea witch hissed. The crabs jumped to the other side of Froggy and the twins, blocking their way out. Do you think I'd let you go without checking to make sure the trade was truthful? The sea witch reached into her gown and pulled a dried-up blowfish from inside of it. She broke off one of the blowfish's needles and pricked Goldilocks' finger with it. She raised her cuttlefish towards the bleeding finger and it stuck out its tongue from between its legs and tasted it. Froggy and the twins were so anxious they could hear one another's heartbeat. They hadn't been planning on this. The cuttlefish turned bright blue. The sea witch frowned angrily and knocked Goldilocks to the ground with one of her claws. Liars! My cuttlefish has turned blue. He did not taste royal blood, she screamed. Uh-oh, Alex said. The crabs leaped onto the twins. The sea witch threw her cuttlefish and it hit Froggy, wrapping its leg around his face. All three frantically fought off the sea creatures, attacking them, but it was no use. The crabs pinched and poked the twins, scratching them and drawing blood. Jack ran to the twins' side and with 2 quick blows of his axe, chopped both of the crabs in half. Froggy mumbled from under the cuttlefish. Red ran to help Froggy. She took a good look at the cuttlefish and then, not wanting to touch it, took off her shoe and began hitting the cuttlefish with it. Not helping, darling, Froggy mumbled under the cuttlefish's clasp. She was mostly hitting him in the head. Across the layer, Goldilocks pulled one of her arms free from under the snake and grabbed its head. With one tug, she pulled the serpent off her body. The sea witch was livid over such an easy escape. She stretched her legs and grew twice in height. She lunged towards Goldilocks, her claws snapping as loudly as gunshots in her direction. Goldilocks, behind you! Jack screamed. Goldilocks swung the snake around, cracking it like a whip, and fought the sea witch off like a lion tamer. She jumped and tumbled on the ground, barely avoiding fatal pinches. The twins had to cover their ears, fearing they were about to witness the Snow Queen's prophecy come true. Red gave the cuttlefish one final smack with her shoe, and the tentacle creature fell on the ground. Jack ran up to it and kicked it across the cave. The cuttlefish flew across the cave and hit the sea witch square in the face and wrapped itself tightly around her head. They could hear a loud, muffled scream as the sea witch struggled to free herself, a prisoner to her own pet. Let's get out of here, Jack yelled. Goldilocks jumped off the platform, somersaulting through the air, and landed near the others. The group ran through the cave and back towards where they left the great sea turtle. They retrieved their scallop shells and strapped them over their faces. Then they jumped onto the turtle's back and grabbed hold of him. Go, turtle, go! Connor yelled. The great sea turtle might not have hurt him, but he could clearly tell by their panicked faces they needed to get out of there fast. The turtle dove into the water and swam as fast as he could down the tunnel. He bolted past the group of sharks waiting at its entrance before they knew something was wrong. He passed all of the anglerfish they had seen on their way into the cave. Their friends began to move a little quicker as they floated in the water. They could tell something wasn't right, but they were just waiting on orders to intervene. The turtle swam through the canyon faster than they had ever seen a turtle swim before. For a moment the twins felt relieved. They had narrowly escaped death once again, but then a high-pitched sound boomed through the ocean, causing a ripple to travel through the water. It sounded like a scream. The sea witch must have freed herself from the cuttlefish. Connor looked back at the canyon and had to blink twice. The sea witch's army of anglerfish and sharks erupted from the canyon and headed towards them like a swarm of underwater wasps. It wasn't long before the terrifying swarm caught up to them. A few of the sharks zeroed in on the turtle. Jack was quick to punch one in the nose as it tried biting the turtle's flipper. Froggy kicked another one and it crashed into yet another. It was like an underwater car chase. A moment later, the sea witch's creatures then gained enough speed and the turtle was surrounded. They needed a miracle if they wanted to escape. Suddenly, a series of colorful blurs zoomed past the turtle, taking the shark and anglerfish with them. The twins looked at each other, each making sure the other had seen it too. More colorful blurs jetted past them, one by one, picking off the creatures, trying to harm the turtle. The mermaids had come to the rescue. As if they were moving through a colorful meteor shower, the twins saw hundreds of mermaids shooting through the ocean and tackling the harmful fish around them. Some mermaids carried spears and shields, others shared nets. The twins found themselves in the middle of a massive underwater battle. The turtle and his passengers had made it back into the bay. They could see the granny's belly floating on the surface above. The great sea turtle surfaced next to it, and Froggy quickly escorted everyone from the back of the turtle to the deck of the ship. Thank you, Alex said to the giant turtle. It dipped its head slightly to her and then disappeared again beneath the water. Alex and Connor ran down the steps to the lower deck. "Where's the fire?" the harp asked them, but they ignored her. Alex and Connor retrieved the Wand of Wonderment from under Goldilocks' cot. They put it on the floor and dumped out all of the Sea Witch's jewels beside them. The black pearl necklace instantly coiled around the base of the scepter, creating a handle. "It's working! We did it!" Connor said, but his sister didn't join him in celebration. "Alex, what's wrong?" Alex was staring down at the floor at a piece of jewelry that hadn't connected itself to the wand. She picked up the ring with the pink and blue diamonds on it that they had seen the Sea Witch wearing. "It's the ring," she said. "It's the ring Bob got Mom." "How do you know it's the same ring and not just a similar one?" Connor asked. "I'm a 13-year-old girl. I know a ring when I see one," Alex exclaimed. "Does this mean Bob is in the land of stories?" Connor asked. A thunderous set of footsteps flew down the steps from the upper deck. It was Jack. "Hey, you two," Jack said. "We could use a hand up here." The twins put the wand away and joined the others on the upper deck. Just when they thought they were safe, angler fish were jumping out of the water and landing on the ship. They snapped their massive jaws at their ankles. The twins joined Red in kicking the hideous fish overboard. Goldilocks picked up her sword and began a gruesome game of baseball with the fish flying up from the water. Jack and Froggy tried starting up the ship, releasing the sails and firing up the flame as high as it could go. "We've got to get away from the water as quickly as possible," Jack yelled. The Granny rose higher and higher above the bay. "We're getting away!" Red cheered, still kicking unwelcome fish off the deck. The ship was gaining height at steady speed. Just when they could finally sigh with relief, an angler fish Red and the twins had missed on the deck flopped high in the air and tore through the Granny's balloon and sails with its huge teeth. The ship began to descend out of the sky, spinning out of control. The shredded sails above them acted more as a floppy parachute than as a balloon. They couldn't tell where they were falling. It wasn't back into the bay, but towards land somewhere in the distance. Everyone was screaming, grabbing onto anything or anyone that they could prevent themselves from being flung off the ship. The twins found each other's hands in the middle of the chaos, and they held onto each other, convinced they would be their last moments alive. With a giant thud, the Granny crashed to the ground. Everyone was hazy from then on. They could hear Claudius barking. They heard the harp yelling from below. They heard Red and Froggy moaning. They saw Jack and Goldilocks trying to stand. They looked out at the land around them and saw gigantic boulders surrounding the horizon. Two figures were moving towards them. One was small and stout, the other tall and gangly. They both had large ears and ugly faces and leaned towards the twins, inspecting them. "Well, well, well," said a gruff voice. "What do we have here?" The twins had one horrifying realization before passing out completely. They had crashed in troll and goblin territory.